when did you get to like 1 million in ARR, for example?
And very quickly, maybe 4.5 months, we were at 1 million ARR. And then it took about 3 weeks to go from like starting the raise to getting a term sheet for the Series A.
How much did you raise?
20 million at 100 million valuation from CRB. Just when you have users and like, you have to worry about things breaking and like fixing bugs and etc. It's just like, it becomes hard to do new things. Like it's better in some ways to just like, if you know what you have to build, it's better to just not have any users. And like, if the database goes down, who cares? Like if you could just like go build the thing with no users, and it's like actually much easier. As soon as you have users, it's just slower to iterate.
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit. Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Do you think the Product Market Fit show has product market fit? Because if you do, then there's something you just have to do. You have to take out your phone. You have to leave the show 5 stars. It lets us reach more founders, and it lets us get better guests. Thank you.
All right, Immad, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, so you guys, you built a massive startup, just raised $300 million, right? From Sequoia earlier this year. And maybe more, at least for me, even more importantly, $500 million in revenue. Profitable, which is not normal in startup land. So congratulations.
Thank you. Still feel like there's a lot to do, but it's a good start.
That's the way you want to feel, man. Day one stuff. So yeah, man, I'm really curious to hear how you started Mercury in the first place, where the idea came from and how you executed against it. But maybe we can start, you had to start it before this, right? Like what was that company?
So I've actually had 3 before this, but
okay.
The last one was for 8 years. So it was the bulk of my pre-Mercury entrepreneurial time. It was called HeyZap. Actually had like 4 full pivots, always in the kind of game developer ecosystem space. The eventual thing we did that did work and we ended up selling it for 45 million was a developer tool around advertising. So if you're a app developer and you wanted to show 5-6 different ad networks, it was super annoying to plug them in one by one and optimize them. So we would package them all up. You just make one call, show video, ad, and we would take care of the rest of it for you and give you like nice dashboards around it.
And this was in gaming, or these ads were like everywhere, any mobile?
So any app developer could use it, but it was most popular among like indie games. Basically on iOS and Android, we were used by kind of top 3 or 4 of the top 10 games. In the last kind of couple of years before and after the acquisition, we were like the main software that those developers used for the space is called ad mediation. And that was actually the first time I really experienced product market fit. Like, I'd been doing startups since 2006, and we didn't launch that 4th pivot until I guess this was like 2014 that we launched it. So it goes to show you, like, you can raise money and do a lot and think you're making progress, but like not achieve product market fit. And it's a very different feeling when you do achieve product market fit.
What were the other 2 startups?
So I did one in London. It was kind of like a Yelp for London, very small scale. That was like 7 months. And then I did another one as my first Y Combinator company in 2007. It was a developer tool for kind of logging into websites, like made it easy to pull in Google and Facebook Connect and things like that.
And what happened to that one?
The first one didn't go anywhere. We kind of just shut it down. The second one, we had lots of users, but no real way to monetize. And we ended up doing a talent acquisition. But I didn't go work at the acquirer. I just started this third company.
So how much time did you spend across those first 2 companies?
So those were quick. It was 7 months for the first one.
Okay.
Almost 2 years for the second one, 8 years for the third one. And then I guess I've been doing Mercury for another 8 years.
Did you ever think, like, especially after those first 2, which weren't really successes, to just like go get a job, or were you always just like, I'm just going to keep building until I get a hit?
So I did have a job before all of that for 1 year.
Okay.
And, I hated it. I just found it, maybe there's like a better company I could have worked for, but I really felt like a cog in the wheel. Like I didn't feel like I had agency. I didn't feel like I could talk to customers. I was an engineer. And then doing my first company, which went nowhere, was a complete disaster in any external metric you could think of. But it was so fun just building something and feeling like I could wake up in the morning, have an idea, talk to customers, go try to build it. Like it just was so like I just find that so exhilarating. The fact that I can just be alive doing that is like good enough for me. Like I don't, if I can raise enough money to survive and do it, and obviously we've subsequently been successful, but there was no point in that that journey where I was like, oh, I wish I just had a job, because I was just like, I really enjoy the journey for the sake of it, which I think is the only way you can do it for like as long as I have.
And then walk me through, like, it's one of the things about coming up with like company after company. The part that I find like really hard, honestly, is just coming up with like solid ideas, like things that are actually worth spending time on. How did that change? Like your first one, at least for me, like my first company was just, I don't know, you just kind of like, I want to start something, and then you kind of find something around you, like that's the thing I'm going to do, and you do it. Like maybe that was your Yelp in London, I'm not sure, but how did that evolve over time?
I feel like it gets easier to do ideas and think of ideas and be in that mind frame. When I started doing a company, like I was like, oh my God, the world is full of ideas, right? I remember before I started my first company, like, it was not obvious how you came up with ideas, what ideas existed. But I feel like when you're doing a business, like you just see problems everywhere. Like obviously a lot of ideas, especially in Silicon Valley, are like B2B ideas, right? So if you're running a business, you're just like, there's so many problems in running a business that you just see ideas everywhere. Like if you're an engineer, you see developer tool ideas everywhere. If you're like trying to like, I don't know, back then, especially, like this is 2006 when I started my company, everything was broken, right? Like, I mean, a lot of the things we take for granted today in terms of running a business are like, didn't exist in 2006. So, and that's like partly how I had the idea for Mercury, but there was no payroll, right? Like you had to use some really weird old school thing. There was no Stripe. I used like this super messed up thing called authorized.net that was like impossible. There was no Slack. We used to do everything over Skype, and it was like just coordinating groups on Skype. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, everything sucked. So like I felt the whole world was like full of ideas. I'm sure it's different now that like I have now that Mercury is like more mature, I have a lot of ideas for Mercury. I don't actually have that many ideas outside Mercury for like, I mean, I invest a lot, so I see a lot of ideas, and that kind of spurs new ideas. But I don't have like that many like, oh, I'll go do this other business idea. Like I feel like my idea scope is smaller now that I'm like doing Mercury and it's scaled, and there's so many ideas around that. But I'm sure if I was like an AI founder right now, or thinking of like ideas in AI, there's probably like a similar feeling of like there being infinite ideas. But yeah, it was like that in 2006, 7, 8, and 9 especially. I feel like there's so many ideas around web and social and mobile that were like so new, and like, yeah, it felt like there was a lot available.
What was the original idea for that last startup? Because you mentioned you ultimately you pivoted like 4 times until you ended up in the thing with Product Market Fit.
Our first idea, this was like end of 2008, was a Flash. Everyone played these casual games on Flash. It was like a web-based platform for casual games. So it was a Flash games distribution network. That was the idea. And it was actually like somewhat successful at like getting a lot of distribution. We had like, I don't know what it was, a peak, probably like 60,000 websites that had this like widget in them that was like allowed you to play Flash games all over the internet. Lots of random websites had kind of this embedded Flash gaming thing that we built.
And what was the problem with it? Just monetization?
This mobile killed it. I mean, no one wanted to play casual games on the web. Like 2008 and 9, it kind of worked.
Yes.
But 2010, it like the shift to mobile was very extreme and very quick. So like it was basically done by then.
And so when you sold the business, you said 45 million in 2016. Is that right?
Start of 2016.
And then did you go work with the acquirer, or were you kind of like hands off right after?
No, I was there for a year, and then I moved on. Had a I was going to do like a 1-year sabbatical, but I basically started working on Mercury as soon as I moved on. I mean, for the first 5 months, it was more research phase, so it wasn't like full time. But I have a hard time just sitting still.
So let's go deep on that. Like, when does the initial idea for what became Mercury come to you? How does it come to you?
There was this like idea that I used to call, I don't know what the official name was, but I used to call like consumerization of enterprise. Where a lot of the tools used as entrepreneur, there's this feeling in 2009-ish that like entrepreneur tools are always going to feel and look crappy, like they'll be hard to use, the products won't be good, etc. But consumer tools were like much higher quality, and like people enjoyed them and they were easy to use, etc. But there was this, then there was a lot of ideas came out, which were just like taking consumer grade product and design and applying it to
Just
kind
like
of
the
B2B
Slack, like the
tools.
Slack
Yeah.
kind of thing.
The
Yeah.
Slack, Stripe, Gusto, etc. So, not everyone, but like people like me who thought about ideas a lot had lists of saying like, oh yeah, here's all the business tools that I use, and like there's gonna be a better version of them. So I distinctly remember I had like payroll as one of those things, and then I knew the Gusto founders before they started Gusto, and that was like one of the ideas. I was like, payroll sucks, someone should make something better, and they came along and did that. So,
and they're doing quite well. So that was a good idea.
But to be clear, I was busy doing that company. So it wasn't like I had a list of these like ideas that I was going to go implement. It was much more like, it's obvious these things will be done. And it's like a pool of like things that you think about. It's like, oh, here's some ideas that people do. And at that point, I'd not done any fintech, not done any banking. It wasn't something I considered as like something that I might do. It was just on my list.
The banking was specifically, or payroll?
Yeah. Banking was one of the things on the list. And eventually, around 2013, I met this other kind of fintech company that was in YC that was issuing debit cards to seniors. And then at that point, I was like, oh, wow, like you can do this. Before then, the idea of actually like going and building something where there'd been this one company called Simple, which is a kind of consumer neobank. But apart from that, it wasn't like, there wasn't like a thing that you could do to actually like issue cards and like.
Because the whole banking as a service, when did that kind of take off and start and make it easy?
I mean, around when we launched. So we were we launched in 2019. Yeah, I would say 2018 was like the first year was like the idea of banking as a service has been around for a while, but like probably 17, 18, probably 18 was like the first year where there was like a few of these services that you could actually get live with, and you didn't have to go, because before then what used to happen is you have to go find a bank and you say, hey, will you work with us? And the bank, most of them are like, what the hell are you talking about?
No.
And there's small numbers that do work with fintechs, like they don't know how to build technology, so it's all it's pretty, especially when you're a seed stage startup with like 4 engineers, it's super hard to think about like, how do I go integrate with a bank backend? And then they also don't, you need to have a compliance and other framework that like a bank expects, which, at this stage, Mercury has all of that. But when you're a small seed funded company, you just don't have like enough staff to like support it. So banking as a service made it possible to kind of get live as a seed stage company. So that was a big enabler.
But in 2013, when you see this company that's issuing debit cards, that's why it's so much of a wow kind of moment, because it's just not something you see every day.
And they actually did the hard work. There was no banking as a service. I think they went and integrated directly with the sponsor bank. So I was really impressed. And at that point, I was like, okay, if they can do it, maybe I could do it someday. And again, it was like, it's weird. Like Mercury has been an idea that it like really stewed in my mind for years and years. Whereas like every other business I did, it was like brainstorm ideas, go do this one. That's at the top of the list. Whereas this one was very much like I felt the pain point as an entrepreneur, and it kind of stewed in my head as like, and I always assumed someone else would do it, like because I was busy with my company.
Well, that's the weird thing, right? I'm just thinking out loud here. You'd think in the world of fast moving tech, like if you have an idea for something that you identify as broken and you just sit on it, like somebody else should do it. You know what I mean? Like somebody else must be thinking that too and doing it. And yet, 4 years, 5 years later, whatever it is, you launch Mercury.
Yeah. I mean, banking is scary for people, right? Like if even in 2017, when I was kind of raising money for this, lots of people were like, hey, why don't you just do a software company? And like, the path to do it is harder, like to do I would say to do a fintech company in general, especially one that has like any sort of payments, like money movement, it's probably 3 times harder than a software company. Like a software company, you can probably launch in 3 months. A payment/banking company will take you like at least 9 months to launch something, probably more than that. And there's the software piece, like, and even the software piece is a superset. Like you have to build all the kind of user-facing software, but then you need controls and compliance and risk software on top of it. And then there's the backend like integration with these like legacy kind of payment rails, which is actually like very complicated. And then there's all the compliance and legal and, partnership work that you have to do. Like it's much more complicated. So I do kind of understand why, even if and like actually I found quite a few people who'd had this idea but just not followed through with it as well. Like it wasn't like this wasn't like a super secretive idea. It was like, yes, we should. It was much more like who had the will to follow through with it. I'd also say, as I said, we would just came into the world where banking as a service was a thing. So that was, I would say, an enabling technology. I think 2 years earlier, if I'd started in 2015 instead of 2017, I think I would have done it, but it would have been a lot harder. Whereas 2017 was a time where it became a little easier. And then, by 2020, 2021, everyone was trying to do a neobank, and it would have been, if we hadn't launched in 2019 and built up like a little bit of a lead, it would have been probably like an overly competitive space by 2020, 2021.
So you have this little this little idea, little seed. You see some things in 2013. It kind of just sits there. Anything else happened through kind of that period?
No, I mean, I was really focused on my other startup. Like when you're running a business, you're not like
you don't have much time for anything else.
Yeah. The only thing that happened that was like somewhat related to this idea is I just started collecting people. I was like, oh yeah. Like every time I met a fintech entrepreneur or fintech investor or someone in banking, I'd like, I'd make a mental note or a physical note where I'd be like, okay, if I ever did this idea, this person would be like really smart and useful to help me with that. So I had this like collection of like mostly entrepreneurs that I'd built up that like when I finally did go do this idea, I was like, hey, remember you met me in XYZ event and like now I'm doing this thing. And everyone's like, especially in Silicon Valley, very like generous with their time when you've got a connection, especially if you're doing something new. But that was, I would say, the only other progress that I like made towards it.
How big of a deal was that, by the way, being in Silicon Valley instead of you were in London, as I already said earlier?
It's hard to like do a comparative. I mean, the US market for banking is freaking huge, right? It's like probably 25 times bigger than the US. It's like 2 trillion in revenue per year. The ideas are just bigger in the US in general, but especially when it comes to kind of fintech and banking. And like everyone's just so ambitious there that like you kind of are forced to think of like big ideas. But yeah, there's definitely like an element of like building the network. And I'm sure there's people, especially in fintech, actually, there is like some pretty good companies that are fintech companies in London. So, but yeah, just being around here and having a network of people and being able to tap into that was definitely useful.
Okay. So that happens. You sell your business, you're in the acquirer. Are you right away thinking about this is the next thing you're going to do, or what happens during that year while you're working there? But as you say, you started to do some research.
I didn't do too much in the year that I was actually working there. I actually was trying to explore whether I wanted to be a VC. So I did like something like 25 investments in my year and mostly decided I didn't want to be a VC. But yeah, it's hard to.
Why not? Just not close enough to the thing, or what turned you off from it?
I found it like a little depressing being a VC. Like I feel like the best, when I first started investing, I was like, wow, I'll be so helpful to entrepreneurs and like, I have all this experience and I can help them, etc. And then I soon found out that like the best entrepreneurs just didn't need me, right? Like I made this investment in this company called Rappi, which is a DoorDash for LATAM. And it's done really well.
Nice.
But honestly, I invested and they never talked to me again. And, I mean, I guess I was like, okay, that's fine. And they were like, not quite a unicorn, but like, yeah, they were like already very successful within a year. So I was like, okay, my best investments never talk to me and are successful regardless of me. So I'm just like this weird, like, I don't want to do something just because I make money doing it or like I want to do something because like I make an impact to the world. And at least when it came to like seed stage investing, and maybe it's different at like later stages, but it didn't feel like my impact would be like transformational. It was like mostly, if you're a good company with a good founder, you're probably going to raise money from someone else, if not me. And you'll probably be successful regardless of any investment. But
I think it's true, by the way. Like I many VCs like kind of talk about the value add, and I'm not saying that there's no value add, there's some, but I think VCs first and foremost, I mean, it's a capital allocator. Like you're really, your number one kind of value to the world is deciding where is this money best allocated for the highest potential, output, risk adjusted. And then the rest is kind of the extra 5-10%. But like, if you don't do that right, nothing else matters. And if you do that right, the rest takes care of itself, kind of, as you're saying.
I mean, there are some things like Y Combinator that like are truly transformational. Like they make an investment when other people are not, or like they come up with a model that's different. And I'm sure there's other examples of that, of like people that were either very early or very transformational in Series A, but like, at least the basic model that I would have done, which was like seed stage investing, I didn't think like was going to be like me doing it would not have changed the trajectory of that many companies. So I found that like pretty depressing. And as I said earlier, I love being an entrepreneur. So I was like, okay, let me just go do that.
And what do you go after, like at that point, and when you leave and your kind of sabbatical gets interrupted?
Yeah, initially I had like a list, this was just the top idea I had. I had like a few other ideas. So mostly I was like, okay, this idea I've had for years and years, let me just go research it. And mostly I was trying to like falsify the idea. I was like, okay, my initial thing was like, it's probably just a bad idea to do this. Let me go figure out why it's bad. But the more I researched it, the more I was like, okay, it's hard, but it's like a deterministic hard. Like it's like a fixed cost hard. Like I just have to do the thing. I have to go get a bank sponsor. I have to go, hire someone that understands compliance and risk, and I have to go build this stuff. But like it was all like it was understandable hard, and like I felt I could go do it and like learn the skills to do it.
And the original idea, by the way, just specifically was what, a bank for startups, or what was the kind of the first premise of the idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what we launched, like an operational bank account that would be your primary bank account when you're running a startup, mostly targeting early stage founders initially. I was just saying that's basically what we launched. So, the idea has been like, I would say even from 2013 has been like fairly consistent. It wasn't like, some people pivot around in terms of idea space, but it was very much like, this is what I wanted to do. And then like, it was just explored other things within the space, but I was like, okay, I still felt good about it. And a lot of the time, I don't know, maybe I just do this, but you have this idea that's like your gut instinct. It's like, I wish someone did this. And then you spend the rest of the time building like an intellectual framework to support why it's a good thing to do. It's like, yes, the market size is big, and like, this is how it would distribute to the use, and like, this is how what the unit economics will look like. So a lot of the stuff I did afterwards was to like persuade myself to actually just go do the idea that I like had the strong instinct for.
Well, and I think that is part of the formula. Like sometimes people downplay the passion, gut feeling side of it, but I mean, you're going to take punch to the face no matter what you do. And so like, if you don't, if you believe highly at a deep level of the thing you're going to do, it helps you get through the values you're going to have for sure.
Yeah, one thing that was different for me with this idea is I was really building it for myself, which, previous things like, I've never been a game developer. Like I just like playing games. So I thought it would be fun. But for this idea, I was very much like, hey, if, I want this tool, I want to use it, and I really want it to exist. And I think that did help fuel this kind of side of it, the passion and like the empathy and the product understanding.
When you did that research, because I think this is a key part of his business, like you said, it's a semi-obvious problem, let's say. It's the sort of thing that a lot of people would have been frustrated by, and it was more, nobody was doing it, nobody did it, finding the right time to do it. What did you go after when you're trying to falsify it, like in those few months? Like, what were the sort of things you were doing to falsify it? What were the sort of things that you wanted to really check in and understand?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do any product or customer work because I was like, I know how to build this product. And I felt most people would believe that I know how to build this product. And I also felt I know how to get the customer. And I felt most people would be willing to believe that I could get a customer for this. So I really wanted to, both to myself and to, I guess, investors eventually, I wanted to be able to like prove the bit that I didn't know, right? Like how, when I started that process, there was no reasonable way I could sit in front of an investor and say, yeah, of course I know how to go build this product, right? Like, but I wanted to go, okay, what is the actual path to building this? And, I explored like getting a bank charter versus working with a sponsor bank, and how did those work? And I talked to a lot of fintech lawyers and financial services lawyers. That was probably like the bulk of the research, was just talking to people and understanding, what are the rules? How do people do this? And actually, lawyers are pretty useful. A, they're smart, they know the law, but B, they actually like also know people. Like they know companies that have done this or tried to do this, and who have they partnered with. Right? If you think about it, a lawyer is often working on contracts. So they actually understand like, if a business tried to do this, who did they partner with, and like which are banks that are easier to work with and harder to work with. So actually, I found lawyers to be extremely useful, and they mostly actually work for free if you don't take too much of their time. If you're like 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, and do that with like 10 lawyers, you can get like a lot of cumulative time and learning in like a pretty short time period. So I did that. And then when I had a framework for what I wanted to do, like, sponsor bank model and all that stuff, I started talking to sponsor banks and like basically, the deliverables or the items that I had before, I did a fundraise was, I worked with a designer and I had like some, rough initial designs of like what it might look like. And I had like 3, either sponsor banks or BaaS players. I think actually at that time, all 3 were actual direct bank deals, but I had 3 kind of term sheets of like, I just went to these like sponsor bank people and I was like, hey, if I was to do a deal with you, what would it look like? And I got a term sheet. And then I went to VCs and I was like, look, I have 3 term sheets from sponsor banks. But, which I did. But like, it wasn't like they were ready to. I mean, I did end up doing one deal, a deal with one of them. So
was that hard, by the way, getting those term sheets, just working your way through these sponsored banks?
I mean, getting the template term sheet was not hard because, I mean, all these people have partnership people and like, whether you work with lawyers or other fintech entrepreneurs, like you can normally get to the partnership people at these places. So getting like an actual like test term sheet, not that hard. Getting the final sponsor bank deal, it took a lot of work, but I don't know. It wasn't hard. Like, I guess for me, like hard things are things that I just can't achieve. So if I achieve something, it's no longer hard.
Then it's easy by definition. I don't know, man.
It's pretty soon after we did our seed round, I went to this conference, Money 2020, which is like the biggest fintech conference. And I basically got the full list of attendance and I, scrapes and stuff. And I found like the 60 people who were going that were like from a bank. And I emailed all 60 of them. So I had this like super intense time in Money 2020 where I just had like, I think we ended up arranging about 30 meetings. So I had 30 meetings with banks at this conference. And, I just raised 5 million. So I was like, And then I just did these meetings, one after the other. And I met a ton of the sponsor banks right there because, most people, when they go to a conference, they want to meet people, right? That's the whole point of them being there. And especially if they're partnership people from banks. And then, I just raised like 6 million. So that I had like some social proof to say like, hey, we're looking for a sponsor bank. And so that introduced me to the whole ecosystem pretty deeply. And then, then it was a case of just kind of selling them on it, getting a deal and negotiating it and all that kind of stuff.
What was the, you mentioned raise 5-6 million kind of a seed. What, like, I mean, on the one hand, you had a track record, you kind of, repeat proven founder. Was it easy to raise that?
Yes. The few things that made it easier is actually like when I started investing, I was working with a lot of investors. So like we were sharing deals and, all that stuff. And actually, weirdly, that 1 year of like investing made my investor network grow a lot more than like being an entrepreneur had. So that made it easier just because I knew so many more investors. And like, when you've done some deals together, like they know roughly how you think and how they think. And that definitely helped build my network there. And then another thing I did pretty early on, and this was actually not even in the course of like trying to raise money, but Andreessen Horowitz had a fintech investor and, I was trying to understand the space and he actually knows banking pretty well. They'd actually invested in a bank called Cross River Bank before they invested in Mercury seed round. So I'd just been like talking to him and I really didn't expect, at this stage, I had nothing. Like, as I said, I hadn't written any code. It was very much just a crazy idea.
And it was just you?
And I had got, by the time I was doing the final pitch, I had like 2 co-founders. But I'd just been talking to him like every few months before that, just to like learn what he knew and then like, get introductions to people, etc. So basically like 4 days into kind of starting to fundraise, I was just giving him an update and I really was not planning to raise from them because I was like, hey, at that point, mostly these Series A funds did Series A's. They didn't do that many seeds. So yeah, I had a meeting with them on Thursday And then literally at the end of the meeting, it was like, hey, why don't you come in for a full partners meeting on Tuesday? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just like, I wasn't even pitching you. I was just like giving you an update. So it was very, and then at that point, I felt like an idiot because I was like, you don't go talk to one VC. You try to talk to 15 VCs. This is like basic Silicon Valley knowledge. Whenever you're like pitching a VC, you talk to 15 of them. But I was really not trying to pitch a VC. I was trying to just have a conversation. So then I tried to send a bunch of emails to arrange meetings with other VCs, but basically like we met on the Tuesday, they gave me a term sheet on the Tuesday. So it was done.
This is the classic, ask for advice, get money sort of thing.
Yeah, very much. But I mean, they moved quickly and I appreciated that. And like they really, who knows whether I would have got any other VC, but like they really did believe in the model. And us doing something crazy when like really there was literally no code written. So I'm impressed that they had the kind of the faith to like bet so early on something like that.
Give me a bit more context in terms of what the space looked like back then, like the neobank space, and just all that kind of that world. I mean, today, like you said, there's so many other players, right? But what was it like then?
So let's say back then, most of the action was in Europe. So there was like Monzo, N26, Tide, Quanto. Those are the main ones. I don't think Revolut was around. Maybe Revolut had started, but they were much more in the Wise and Revolut were in international kind of money movements rather than banking. So most of the action was in Europe, and actually a lot of the people I talked to when I was doing the research were in Europe. And in the US, there was Chime and Aspiration. I want to say those were probably the only two around, but they were much smaller. I think maybe Chime was a unicorn, but only just. And it was very much like, it was still a question mark on like whether this was a real category in the US at that time.
And Chime was focused on who as an ICP?
They were, and I would say they still are focused on kind of underbanked consumers, like people who don't have bank accounts and they're like, subprime kind of consumers.
Okay, so the idea of owning kind of startups and early stage companies from a banking perspective in the US was white space. Like nobody was kind of going after that.
Yeah,
in a big way
I think there was one company that tried a little bit called Seed that was doing kind of SMB banking, but at that point that kind of faltered. But yeah, nothing at scale for sure.
So you raise this money, you get the sponsor bank. What's next?
Basically spent something like a year to like go build everything. It's quite a complicated product, and then as I said earlier, you also have to do all the back end things, and to do a bank account that's really going to replace all your operational usage, it can't have missing features, right? So and I had a pretty high bar. I was like, it needs checks, it needs debit cards, it needs wires, it needs ACH, it needs international wires, and like actually any one of those payments type is like normally a full startup. Like just to issue debit cards and do all of that is like a lot of work by itself. But like I was like, I have to do all 5 of these. So that was a high bar, both in and out, right? Like money moving in and out.
You love this show. You don't want to miss the next episode. Why would you? So hit that follow button. Trust me, it's in your own best interest.
And how did you decide? Like that's an important decision on its own. Like how did you decide that? Was that gut feeling, or how much of that was kind of speaking to potential customers?
I mean, I was just like, what? I didn't speak to anyone. I was just like, from a personal perspective, what would we learn if we launched and didn't have one of these crucial things? All we'd learn is that everyone would say, I need that. I need that.
Right.
So like there was, in my opinion, there was nothing to learn without having everything. And then secondly, first impressions do matter, and having something that was like obviously missing obvious features that like a bunch of people would show up for and then leave frustrated would like be, in my opinion, a bad impression. I've also found that if you don't build the thing up front, it's often actually hard to build it after you launch. This is like pretty contrarian, but just when you have users and like, you have to worry about things breaking and like fixing bugs and etc. It's just like, it becomes hard to do new things. Like it's better in some ways to just like, if you know what you have to build, it's better to just not have any users. And like, if the database goes down, who cares? Like if you could just like go build the thing with no users, and it's like actually much easier. As soon as you have users, it's just slower to iterate. It's just, I mean, obviously you want users eventually to give you signal and learn from them. But like, if you just need a set of features, then I don't think there's any point in launching before that set of features.
I guess that makes sense. Like when you're building, there's kind of, you're building a brand new thing that doesn't exist. Like say it's Airbnb or Uber or one of these classic things, or you're building a 10x version, right? There you got to say, I don't really know how people are going to stay in people's houses and this and that, whatever. But if you're like, I'm going to build a 10x version of these are the banks, this is what happens today, I'm going to do 10x better. You do kind of know, like, clearly these are the things that after 100 years of banking people need. Let's just do it much better.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some things missing, but like the obvious stuff wasn't missing. And yeah, that's the thing. Like if I need to be 10x better, I have to have all the actual things, and then I can try to build something 10x better. You can't be like missing something major and like say, oh, but I'm 10x better, right? That doesn't make any sense. So we had a high bar, and then we ended up actually doing 2 sponsor bank deals, like one with a sponsor bank and one with a BaaS provider. So that slowed us down just because the first one made all these promises to us that they didn't deliver on. So that took us an extra 6 months as well. So it took us about a year and a half to go from like.
So that wasn't for redundancy. That was just like one didn't work out the way you expected. So you had to
one didn't work
it.
out, and it was really complicated integration. But we had to shut it down completely and do one from scratch. But obviously we'd learned something from the first one, but it was still frustrating. So it took us a year and a half from like fundraise to launch.
And how many people were you through that time?
Mostly 8 people. We quite quickly hired 8 people, mostly engineers. So from the 8 people, 6, including me, were engineering, and then 1 design, 1 kind of product. And then, but at launch we had 1 extra engineer, so we were 9.
You kept it pretty lean, like with 5-6 million. I mean, you could have gone for a bigger team if you wanted.
Yeah, I talked to one fintech entrepreneur where he had like a real war story around how it took him like 3 years to get something live. And so in back of my mind, I was like, okay, it might take 3 years to launch this thing. And then if it took 3 years and then you want to launch it and have like make some progress. So it might take 3.5 years to raise money again. So that was my, like, I went in with like, what's the worst case scenario? And like, I wanted to have enough money and keep the team lean enough to like be able to get to the worst case scenario. I've also found that more than probably around like the number 16, things slow down quite a bit. Like you need, but like 8 people in a room, like you don't really need management. It's like everyone knows what everyone's doing. Everyone's kind of aligned. If you have to change something tomorrow, like everyone kind of knows all the reasons you're changing it. And like by the time you change it, everyone's like, yeah, let's go change it kind of thing. Yeah, as soon as you get above a certain number of people, like maybe 12, 13, 14, 16 for sure, but like maybe even earlier, it just becomes harder to change things. Like there's always someone that has some problem, and like you have to you have to get them on board when there's like alignment issues, and you have to do management. It's just so much simpler when there's a smaller team and everyone's like on the same
overhead
page.
communication, alignment, like they're all costs, they're all drags to just like getting things done. And yeah, like when you're a small team of people, everybody understands everything that's going on, all the context is there. You just don't need to like disseminate information, right?
5 of the initial 8 people had worked with me for 5 years at my previous company, so we all knew how to work together, and we were all like knew that everyone was working pretty good.
And so you have the product, like how do you structure the launch? Is it like a 0 to 1 launch? You have like this design partner phase, beta phase? How do you kind of set that up?
Yeah, so we had like 30 or so customers that were just kind of playing with it, but it didn't really work. Like there was lots of these missing features, but we just needed like some people actually testing it and like issuing cards and all that kind of stuff. Really, like it was only like 1 or 2 weeks before we actually finally launched that like everything worked, and then we were like, okay, let's launch. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Like my normal views and my previous experience of launching things is like you launch and then the work starts, right? Like
it's like anticlimactic. You think it's
that's
right.
You launch, like a few people care, but no one really cares, and then you start like figuring out like how to sell it and like what's missing and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, we launched and it just like blew up, and it it was like like people really resonated with the idea, and not like the whole world, but like you don't need the whole world at day 0, but there was like at least 1 or 2% of entrepreneurs that were just like, oh my God, this was such a pain. Like, I can't believe this is solving it. And we just like, that 1 or 2% was like a really, really large fuel for growth. And we grew kind of 30 to 40% a month for the first 12 months.
How do you get that initial cohort? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, there's referrals and word of mouth that happen after, but like, just to get any sort of excitement at launch, you need to do something.
Honestly, it was mostly on Twitter. I had a bit of a Twitter following at the time, which I'd like deliberately cultivated for a few years. And then we had 60 investors in our seed round. So I deliberately, we had Andreessen Horowitz as a lead. And then as soon as they kind of committed, which was relatively early, I deliberately went and like hunted people that had like a large portfolio of companies that they had invested in, or they had like a big kind of social media following, or they were like kind of helpful fintech entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. So I had 60 of them, and that was really helpful. Like there was definitely, at that point it was still called Twitter, but them tweeting about it and like giving, because so much of Mercury is about trust, right? Like you have to trust this startup to like hold your money, and when someone that everyone recognizes, like Andreessen Horowitz or whatever, says like, "Hey, we invested in this thing. We believe that we believe in Immad and what he's building, etc." Like that gives a lot of confidence to people to say, "Oh, let me try this out." So most of the first kind of 2 to 3 weeks were really like driven by kind of that investor base kicking it off and like providing that kind of initial ignition to the distribution.
And after that, was it mainly word of mouth, or was there other like go-to-market you used in those first few months?
First 5-6 months was all word of mouth. The only other significant thing that happens after that is we did a partnership with Stripe Atlas. So we became one of the. So after you incorporate, you need a bank account, and we became along with SVB, we were like the second partner that they recommended. I think honestly, those two. Oh, I did some work with Y Combinator, just because I've done Y Combinator a few times. So it was mostly just selling to the company. There wasn't like an official partnership at the time, but that was also like initially part of the distribution strategy.
By the way,
but a lot of it was organic and word of mouth.
You did YC twice, right?
Yes, in 2007 and 2009.
What was the reason to do it the second time? Just curious.
I mean, I love YC. Like, kind of wanted to do it for Mercury as well. It didn't work out, but I mean, they gave me money quickly. I knew Paul Graham. It was
why not?
It wasn't a difficult decision. It wasn't like after my first YC company, it's not like I knew a ton of investors and I could raise money easily anyway. So it was even that $30,000 that they gave us when it was at that point, it was very much just an idea. Was like a nice kickstart to kind of doing it.
So back to this launch. One of the questions I have is, the idea is it's a better bank. It's a 10x better bank for startups. But what specifically resonated the most? Like, what were the biggest annoyances of traditional banks for startups at that point that you were doing so much better that people were like, I love Mercury because?
Yeah. Well, to be clear, we're not a bank. We're a fintech company that works with sponsor banks. But there's a bunch of things that are just like, in my opinion, so obvious, but so annoying that like people are so used to how bad banks are that they just don't realize how annoying they are until they see like something else. So, I mean, take online sign up, right? Like, I mean, it's obvious, but yeah, that was like, and it continues to be a big differentiator. Like if you want to go sign up to Chase, go to their website. You cannot sign up. You have to go walk to a Chase branch and, either pre-arrange an appointment or like you have to sit there for 2 hours. We did this actually when we started Mercury. We signed up for like 8 different banks just to like see what the experience was like. It's all bad. Like there is literally no one experience that's good.
It was all in person, all the other banks?
Yeah, I mean, the only alternative is SVB was not in person at the time, but it took three weeks of like doing online forms and waiting. And so it was, and Mercury, you can get a bank account online same day, most of the time. So just that experience of like just signing up is so painful. And then just basic things, like if you want to do a wire, like trying to do a wire with the first time you sign up, they don't enable your account for a while. You have to go back there to enable your account for a while. And then even when they do, it's like, you have to like, you have to call them and then they have to call you and then they have to call maybe someone else. It's just so ridiculous, like how these basic experiences are so painful.
You'd think that'd be for compliance reasons. Like you'd think there'd be no way for them to get around it versus just poor UX, poor design.
I mean, there's definitely some compliance things, but even the compliance stuff, right? Like, okay, you need to ask some questions, like why isn't it in the product? Like there should be, and we have lots of escalation in the product. Like we're like, hey, you're a crypto company. Now you have to answer these other 5 questions and it's all in the product. Like it's not, just because it's compliance and there's like more to do, it doesn't mean it involves like humans calling you. Like you can make a product that like is built around that. A lot of the reasons that wires are like that is because banks don't have like true TOTP authentication, right? That like when you, I mean, nowadays, I guess they mostly have SMS kind of verification, but that's very easy to, steal someone's phone number and like now you can like access their bank account. So, but because the security level is not like up to like modern standards, then they have to have some other out of band way of like trying to verify a wire. But if you just do things at like a high enough standard of security, then you don't need to. And I'm sure there's been some issue, but almost no issues around like someone unauthorized sending a wire on your behalf.
And were you getting mainly people who were just opening up, like starting a new startup and starting fresh, or were you getting people shutting down like a Chase account or whatever it was and moving to Mercury, like in that first 6 months, first year?
The first initial like few weeks, a lot of it was just like people just being like, oh my God, I'm going to switch to this kind of thing. But they were all like, I would say very early in their journey. It's definitely much harder to get someone to switch when they've got a long-term embedded banking experience. Nowadays, about 75% of our customers are with probably their first bank account. They're within 6 months of incorporating. And that is like one of, in my early pitch of like why early stage startups made sense is I was like, hey, there's always new startups. So there's always this kind of new cohort of companies that we can get and then we can scale with them as they grow. And that's mostly how it's played out.
Well, also because like it feels like most of the costs of the annoyances of a bank, I mean, like a lot of them are at the beginning, like setting it up, initiating like a wire process. Once you've got it all set, it's probably still very full friction, but the kind of, you've done a lot of the work already, right? So like the upside is
you've done a lot of the work, and there's also you're just a lot more locked in. Like there's also like annoying switching costs. It's still pretty bad. I mean, you still have to like deal with it, and then they have lots of like annoying fees that you don't expect. So it's not a great experience afterwards. But yeah, definitely the switching costs versus the pain of the experience versus like people don't know what Mercury will really be like until they use it, so they don't necessarily know what's better.
So you mentioned last startup, like it took many years, like full pivots to finally feel what true product market fit was. With Mercury, did you feel true product market fit right away at launch?
I would say I was like very skeptical because I was like, oh, it's just a launch and everyone's excited. Like, let's not. But in hindsight, we definitely had like instant product market fit and it kind of grew very fast. I had a lot of reservations on like leaning in too much in that. Like, I don't want to go hire too much or like do too much just because I thought like it was going well. I wanted to be like 100% sure. But yeah, I would say we had like instant product market fit.
How much how fast did you grow that year? Like when did you get to like $1 million in ARR, for example?
I mean, very quickly. I don't want to like misquote. So let me try to think for a second. I want to say like maybe 4.5 months we were at $1 million ARR. It's kind of a good question. I should really know that.
It's a classic PMF show question, but not necessarily something you think about when you're, half $1 billion ARR.
Yeah, at this stage, I'm not like going like, when did we get to? But it's a good question. To be fair, it's not ARR for us, right? It's
that was going to be my question. What is the model? Like, where's that revenue come from initially?
The way we make money is the two main ways is number one, people use our debit card or credit card, and we make money on the interchange. So every time you swipe, there's a fee, and as the issuer, you get like a pretty big chunk of the fee. And then number two, if you have money in your operational checking account or savings account, we get a percentage of the interest rate from our bank partners.
But originally, you didn't have credit cards, right, at launch, or did you?
We had debit cards, and actually, I wasn't expecting it, but it was actually a big driver to revenue, even from day zero. So. Yeah, lots of people do use debit cards initially, and then they eventually migrate to credit cards. And then we ended up launching a credit card in 2022.
In those first years, this is a question I have whenever a company just kind of hits. Because from the outside looking in, sometimes that feels like, wow, that was so easy. You know what I mean? Like, so basically you had an idea, you built the thing, you launched the thing, it worked. Like, that's the story. My question is like, what was the hard part of Mercury besides just the infrastructure? I know setting it up was like not easy, as you said, but it was kind of like known things you had to solve and you solved them. But what would you say was like the hardest part of building Mercury in that first period, those first couple of years?
I mean, there was definitely like a time pre-launch where it took us such a long time, a year and a half, at least it felt really long, no users. And there was this time where I went and like talked to a bunch of customers or like potential customers, and like didn't seem like people were that excited about it. They were like, oh yeah, this sounds kind of cool. Yeah, but it wasn't like, I remember just going like, wow, like, are we doing the right thing, right? Because we were just in a hole for like a really long time just building, and there was like very little external validation to say like we were doing the right thing. So that was probably like the hardest initial time. And there's definitely like moments of like panic, right? Like when COVID happened, like it's like March 2020, interest rates go to zero, which, from our perspective, like that was like, at that point, like 60% of our revenue went to zero, basically. So obviously interest rates went to zero, and I was like, the whole economy is shutting down. Like, is anyone going to do startups, right? Like, I don't know if you remember 2020, like there was definitely a moment in time where it felt like this was this was like a pause in the whole world, and like startups weren't going to be any different from that. It really was like a existential moment, but like 2 months later we were back. It was like 2 months later we like, our revenue like blew up and like all this stuff happened. And I was like, okay, it was fine in the end.
In that zero rate environment, your revenue goes up, I guess, mainly because of the interchange then?
Yeah, interchange. Like we basically like e-commerce completely blew up, and then with that, like debit card usage blew up. So I found the answer.
Nice. There you
April
go.
2019 is when we launched, and we were at $1 million in annualized revenue in September 2019.
Okay, so 6 months, 5, 6 months.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 months, yeah.
5 months.
That's pretty
awesome.
quick.
Nice. Well done. And then when did you so you raised your seed, built for a year and a half, launched. When did you raise your A, and how big was it?
So we actually we started raising the A 3 weeks after we launched. Basically, like the launch like really did well on Twitter, and I had like a ton of VCs like hit me up saying like, oh yeah, this is great. Like I was like, okay, like after things calmed down a little bit, which for some reason I thought was 3 weeks later, I was like, okay, let me just go raise a round. And then it took about 3 weeks to go from like starting the raise to getting a term sheet for the Series A.
How much did you raise?
At 20 million at 100 million valuation from CRB.
Got it. And okay, so let's stop it there. Let me just ask the last couple questions we end on, and we actually already touched on one, and the other one I kind of touched on, which is, but you had a bit of anyways. When did you feel like you had true product market fit? You said that when you launched, in hindsight, you did have true product market fit, but it didn't feel that way. Like, when did you, going through it, be like, you know what? Yeah, we have real product market fit.
I didn't truly believe it until after that COVID blip, because like, COVID hit us and like we lost half our revenue, and then literally 2 months later we were back or higher than our previous revenue level. And at that point I was like, if a global pandemic can't stop us and can't stop this growth, then like we're probably pretty good at this point.
Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah, that was like the switch in my mind, at least.
Awesome. And then the last question is, if you, like you've been through many startups yourself, you invested in a lot. If you have like one piece of advice for early stage founders, what would that be?
Yeah, I think one thing that I didn't do, but at my previous companies, but I did at Mercury, that was like very useful, is we wrote down kind of our cultural attributes and what we really cared about in terms of Mercury culture, like basically a few months in, when there was only 4 people. And that was super useful because that initial kind of, the next 8 people we hired or whatever, we knew what we were looking for. We were like, these are the personality types we care about. This is the type of culture we want to build. And it's, if we were at 20 people and then we tried to write the culture, then like it's hard to have a cohesive culture when you haven't tried to build a cohesive culture. So even now at almost 1,000 people, like that early investment and like thinking about culture actively and like trying to hire against it has like played fruit in a way that's like, it's like this underlying kind of like reason that Mercury is successful is that we have like the strong culture and we hire people against it. That is like easy to miss if you don't like pay attention to it.
Awesome. Well, Immad, thanks for sharing your story, man. It's been great.
Yeah, it's good chatting.
Wow, what an episode. You're probably in awe. You're in absolute shock. You're like, that helped me so much. So guess what? Now it's your turn to help someone else. Share the episode in the WhatsApp group you have with founders. Share it on that Slack channel. Send it to your founder friends and help them out. Trust me, they will love you for it.